Thank you for the introduction and for the right pronunciation of my name. That's very appreciated. So in this talk, I'm not going to cover a single paper, but this is composed by multiple puzzles collected via different papers done with some of my great collaborators. The papers are listed here. So yeah, we're going to talk about random complexity of multi-party computation. Okay. So by now, this stuff here, it's quite clear what it is. Right, we have a real-world protocol where parties exchange messages because they want to evaluate the functionality over their private input. And the way we always argue security is that if there is a coalition of parties attacking this protocol in the real world on the left-hand side, then what you should be able to do is that you should be able to prove that an adversary in this idealized world can actually do the same type of damage. Okay, so if we can prove that, it means that our protocol is secure, because in the ideal world, of course, here, like by definition, the inputs of the honest parties are protected, because only like this judge, this trusted party manages to see the input of the honest parties. It does the computation and gives back the result to the participants, right? So all good. So the setting we are going to consider now is the setting where all the parties but one can be corrupted, this honest majority. Parties can misbehave arbitrarily, so they can do whatever they want to attack the protocol. Computational security, so we assume that the adversary is probabilistic polynomial time and black box simulation. I'll give more details on this later on. Okay, now I just wanted to give a better intuition about what it means for a protocol to be secure. Sometimes we have a picture like this and we say the real world is indistinguishable from the ideal world, something like that, which I always find very confusing because these two things are very different. I mean, of course, like they are different beasts. So I just wanted to elaborate more on this. So what it means for a protocol to be secure, it means that we can claim security only if we can exhibit a simulator, which is what is called an ideal world adversary, that can do whatever, anything like that the real world adversary can do in that protocol on the left. Okay? And now, this in particular means that this simulator on the right should be able to kind of use the right inputs. In particular, as you can see on the right side, the simulator like issues some x3 and x4 and receives back the output of the functionality, which is y. And if we really want these two things to be indistinguishable, this means that whatever the adversary uses as input for Alice and Bob, for the corrupted Alice and Bob there, the simulator should be able to use exactly the same input. Okay, that's kind of one main task that the simulator should be able to do. And of course, the question here is like, how does a simulator, why can a simulator do that? Why can a simulator make sure that in this ideal world experiment, he uses and he knows the input that some corrupted parties are using in the real world? So to summarize, the main task of the simulator is like, and then the following, like the simulator is helped by the fact that it can indeed access and have some control over the corrupted party. So a corrupted party, an adversary is just a polynomial time algorithm. So what we say is that the adversary, in the case of black box simulation, has oracle access to the adversary. And so he can query the adversary, he can restart the adversary. It's just an algorithm, so you can do whatever you want. It's like you have a local program and you can reset it, you can do anything. So, and in particular, the simulator, as we said, has two tasks. He needs to be able to extract this input from these corrupted parties. That's kind of a fundamental task. Moreover, on top of that, he needs to be able to force the output that, as we saw in the previous picture, will be received from the ideal functionality. Okay? Those are the two main tasks. And the simulator is a polynomial time. Actually, is expected polynomial time in what we will see here. I will not go into the details of this. So the question is like now, how does the simulator do that? I mean, it seems always contradictory that we say that there exists an algorithm that can extract inputs from parties. Okay, but then if you have such an algorithm, then it means that also maybe an adversary can do exactly the same thing. If a simulator can do that, why can't an adversary use this procedure to extract inputs from corrupted parties? Okay. So what is the leverage that the simulator has compared to an adversarial part? Okay, and one typical way to simulate and to make things work in multi-party computation, but also in zero knowledge in many, many cases, is to assume that there is an angel, some trusted guy that gives us what is called some setup. In particular, in this case, this angel gives us some combo reference string. And in this example, the combo reference string is a public key of an encryption scheme. And then what happens is that you have your protocol, your very complicated multi-party computation protocol. At some point, you force the parties to encrypt their input using this public key. Okay? And now the idea here is that because this CRS is honestly generated by a party we trust, nobody will know the secret key other than the trusted party. And the trusted party will never disclose the secret key to anyone. That's very crucial. So the idea is that here, given that the adversary doesn't know the secret key, that the inputs are encrypted, and that you do some other smart stuff that doesn't trivially disclose the input, then what you have is that a simulator that instead has the secret key can extract the input of a corrupted party. Okay? That's just one of the very usual tricks that we use. There are many, many variations, but at a very high level, that's kind of what happens. The adversary doesn't have the secret key, but the simulator does have the secret key. And so you can extract the input from a corrupted party, okay? And then that's how your ideal world adversary works. Then you can query the ideal functionality with the input of the corrupted party, receive back the output, and then do some other smart things to make sure that the adversary actually does receive the output of the functionality. And moreover, you need to make sure that like you never use the input of honest parties, because the simulator crucially doesn't have any input of the honest parties. That would make things quite trivial. Now the problem is that like angels may not exist, or if they do exist and someone does generate the CRS, they may be bad people and just give the secret key to corrupted parties. Okay, so this is a reference to Dr. Who, I don't know. So that's why it may sound strange. Okay, so given that angels don't exist, ideally what we want is that there is no trusted setup. And what we want is that parties are able to communicate. So there is indeed a way so that parties can exchange messages. That's the list that we want. And but that's it. Okay? And that's the setting we are going to study here. The setting where there is no setup and parties just can communicate. Let's assume for now that the communication is authenticated, so I know who I am speaking with. And now the question is again here, okay, there is no setup. Now what is the leverage? How does the simulator work in this case? And again, as I said before, the simulator does have like this black box access to the adversary. So the thing that the simulator can do now is to take the adversary and start the adversary and then maybe reset it. Okay, this is what is called rewind. Okay, and the rewinding is just that you really just start the adversary again and again using the same randomness, and by exploiting the fact that the adversary is actually deterministic once you fix the randomness. Okay. Okay, so in particular, what happens is that the simulator will not program anything, will not have any strange control over setup, but the simulator will do this. Will kind of like rewind by pretending that like the session has restarted. Please let's do a new iteration of the protocol with the adversarial parties, which will have no clue that this is happening because again they are stateless. An adversary is a stateless deterministic machine once the randomness is fixed. Okay. So what is a typical example? What do we typically have in these type of protocols that use this rewinding. Something very typical, it's like that. You have your sophisticated protocol, and then maybe let X1 be the input of Bob in this case. So Bob takes his input, secret shares the input, and commit to these two shares using a commitment scheme that's hiding and binding. And now Alice says, okay, please let me see what you have committed in one of these commitments. Bob shows one of the share, and the protocol continues. Okay? Now, from a security point of view, here, the input of Bob is protected because you just leak one share, and the commitment is hiding. So really, this thing, at least against a probabilistic polynomial adversary, leaks just one share. But what happens is that when you want to simulate and you want to extract the input from this corrupted party, you can use the rewind because the simulator can ask first, for the shared 0, and then he rewinds and gets the share for 1. And now you can just, the simulator can finally reconstruct the secret. Okay? So this thing, the way I've explained it, doesn't really work. Because an adversary can always just refuse to send you the share for, I don't know, for 0, for example, right? An adversary can be willing to give you a share for 1, but he may not give you the share for 0. So the way you solve this problem is by kind of repeating this process either in parallel or in sequence, and that's how you solve this problem. Okay? It's much more complicated in general, but that's more or less what happens. That's the idea here. Okay. So the final setting we consider in this talk is this one, like all the properties I mentioned before, plus the fact that there is no CRS, no setup. And now, what are the nice things about this setting? The nice thing is that there is no unrealistic setup, and all the parties can be corrupted, which is, great, let's say. But there are also some negative aspects that should be mentioned. In particular, when you are in the dishonest majority setting, you cannot guarantee that parties can recover the output of the computation. Okay, not even fairness is guaranteed, which means that you can be in the situation where the adversary gets the output, but honest parties don't. Okay, but unfortunately, unless for some specific functionality, there is nothing we can do. This is a problem of this strong corruption setting. And composition is not guaranteed. If you assume that there are multiple executions of this protocol, it's easy to show that there are some schedules where the simulator just cannot work. Okay? So in general, composition doesn't hold. There are some type of compositions you can do. You need to be careful, or you need to assume something about how the messages are scheduled, but if you want UC, that's not kind of the model you should use. Okay, so now the question I want to investigate now is like, okay, great. Now let's see what is the best we can do in this setting in terms of communication around. Okay, I want to compute some non-trivial functionalities, and I want to understand how much interaction is needed between the parties. How many messages do the parties need to exchange? And let's see, let's consider now like one of the simplest functionality you can think of, which is the coin tossing functionality. Okay, the coin tossing functionality is a functionality that doesn't take any input, but when you query the functionality, it gives you back the output that I'm denoting with Y here. And the question we ask is like, what are, again, the minimal number of interactions required to toss some number of coins that is more than log n. Okay, if you want to toss log n coins, that's easy. I mean, just think for a second, and you see that it's trivial. Okay, and what Jonathan Garcia-Raffel-Ostrowski proved in Crypto 2004 is that you need at least 5 rounds of interaction if you want both parties to recover the output. Okay? And I'll show you briefly how the impossibility works, just to make the point on about like why this rewinding is why this discussion about rewinding is useful, and where this comes into the game when it comes to proving feasibility or impossibility result. Okay, so So this impossibility says that you need 5 rounds of interaction. So for me here, a round is like a message that goes from Alice to Bob. That's 1 round. Okay, when a message goes from Bob to Alice, that's another round. Okay, so in this case, I have 3 rounds in total. So assume by contradiction now that you can do coin tossing with just 4 rounds of interaction. By contradiction, we know that that's not possible. So we know that both Alice and Bob will get the output at some point. I mean, this is the third round is the second last round. So Alice must receive the output in the 3rd round. That's what it means. Bob will receive the output in the last round. That's fine. He may even receive the output before, but let's assume that at least he needs to receive the output in the last round. Okay? And now by assumption, because this protocol is secure, it means that there is a simulator. And what we said is that the only power that the simulator has is to kind of do rewinding. But you should be able to see here that rewinding doesn't really help. It's not like the simulator has a lot of room for rewinding. Like you don't have this very nice pattern where you can do this kind of cut and choose, right? Because here the simulator speaks first. So by the end of the 3rd round, the simulator should be able to kind of force an output to the honest Alice. But the only thing that the simulator can do before forcing this output is just, I don't know, like rewinding and maybe starting a new session. And that's the only thing you can do, right? So there is no purpose in rewinding the 3rd round here because, again, at the 3rd round, at the moment that the simulator, at the moment that Alice receives the 3rd round, Alice will receive the output, must receive the output, and that's the output that she will like. Okay? So, but we said that the goal of the simulator is to force, to make sure that the corrupted party receives whatever the ideal functionality tells. So there is a problem here. Because again, the only type of rewind that the simulator can do is just restarting the entire session. And this is equivalent to just starting a new session, which is something that, I mean, everyone can do. I can always start a new session of a protocol. So the intuition behind this type of impossibility proof is that because there is nothing smart the simulator can do, the adversary can kind of do the same. Because, exactly because like you don't have this cut and choose like pattern that was described in the previous slide. Okay, so what happens is that I can indeed design an adversary that runs internally the simulator. Whenever the simulator wants to send a message, the adversary just forwards this message to the adversary. Whatever the adversary sends to like Bob is forwarded back to the simulator. And at some point, we know that the simulator will say, give me the output now. Because the simulator thinks it's interacting with an ideal functionality. So the simulator says, give me the output. And the adversary will just say, we just pick and craft some output he really likes because he wants to bias ultimately this coin toss. Okay? So the simulator then, the adversary will do that. And the simulator, by definition, is able to force this output to Alice. And this means that here, actually, Alice has received an output which is biased because, I mean, the adversary will not pick a uniformly random string. The adversary wants to bias this process because of whatever reason. Okay? So what we have is that there is a value that then in the ideal world appears with probability 2 to the minus n. Okay? Assume that the output of this ideal functionality are bit strings of size n. Whereas this value appears in the real world with probability much bigger. Okay? Maybe with probability non-negligible. And this means that our initial assumption was not true. Right? This protocol cannot exist. Okay? That's kind of how you prove this type of impossibility result. And now what happened is that a natural question will be, okay, let's consider maybe a better communication model. So it's boring that that I need to wait to receive the message before speaking. So maybe let's allow parties to speak simultaneously in each round, okay? The first round, I don't wait, let's all talk. And in the second round, we do the same. And in this model, what is important is that the adversary here is rushing, so the ith message of Alice, it's independent from the ith message of Bob, okay? but the adversary, before sending its own ith message, can decide to wait for the honest part. Okay, that's what we mean by rush. So, and in this model, what we have is that things are not becomes a little bit better because, but not by much, because we need at least 4 rounds of communication in this case. And the impossibility here is proven by just reduction to the impossibility result I showed you before. Okay. So the summary here is that if you don't have any setup and you want to evaluate some functionality, some non-trivial functionality like coin tossing or something more sophisticated than that, you need at least 4 rounds of interaction in that in this model where parties can simultaneously speak. Now, the implication of this bound is that sometimes, we said that setup we don't believe that setup comes from the sky, and so maybe you can indeed use an MPC protocol of this type just to generate the setup. And so what we said now is that if you want to generate a CRS or you want to generate some more sophisticated form of setup, this means that you need to engage in an MPC protocol that, again, requires 4 rounds of interaction. And this seems bad. So the question now is like, yeah, but is it true? Like, are we sure that maybe there is nothing better we can do in this case? And the point here is that maybe when you want to generate a setup, maybe when you want to generate a CRS, you can tolerate a relaxed security notion and things will work fine. And maybe in this relaxed security notion, you can do something better in terms of round complexity. So in Crypto 2018, it was introduced this notion of least coin tossing, which relaxes the coin tossing functionality in the following way. So the coin tossing functionality is like the one on the right-hand side where the adversary just cannot do much. The only thing the adversary can do is to receive an output, and because I said you cannot get fairness or guaranteed output delivery, the adversary can decide to just abort and receives an output, and the adversary says, I don't like it. End of the story. In least coin tossing instead, what you have is that the adversary receives k random strings, k outputs, k candidate outputs. And now he can decide which of these k outputs the adversary likes. Okay? So when the adversary decides that he likes the ith output, the adversary sends this index to the ideal functionality, and the ideal functionality delivers this output to the other part. Okay? So we are allowing the adversary to be a bit stronger and to be able to bias a bit more the output of the computation. I mean, this is of course a worse functionality compared to the one we have on the right. Okay? But the point is that this relaxed functionality can actually be realized in fewer than 4 rounds. So here you can reduce the communication complexity to 3 rounds. So we have an improvement. Okay? And the nice thing is that this functionality is still useful. Actually, it can be used to generate, for example, the setup for a NISIC proof system. So assume that you have an NISIC proof system of this kind that I'm calling by zero knowledge, where the CRS is just a random bit string. There are many schemes that have this structure. Okay. So again, what you want is that this CRS, you don't believe in trusted parties. So what you can do is that you can engage in a protocol, in a 3-round protocol that realizes the least coin tossing functionality. You generate your CRS using this interactive protocol, and then you engage in your NISIC proof. And the point is that this thing is secure because, if you think about how the reduction would work, the reduction would be something like CRS prime comes from your external challenger, and now you are trying to force and convince the adversary that, come on, let's output CRS prime. Okay? So CRS prime will be part of one of these many outputs that the adversary can pick. And with some probability 1 over k, the adversary will indeed pick the CRS and the reduction will work. I will not go into the details of this, but I hope that's kind of simple. And that gives the intuition that if the protocol on the right is not secure, then you can easily do a reduction to the security of this pi zero knowledge. I hope that this is like gives some decent intuition about that. And now the natural question would be to ask okay, NIDSIC protocols have CRSs that look like random bit strings, but in MPC and also in zero knowledge, we sometimes have much more complicated setups. For example, this is a very common setup with the one we have on the right, where like parties share this OT correlation. Okay, they have some correlated randomness. Like you have one party that has 2 strings, S0 and S1, and the other party has just one of the 2 strings. Okay? And the point is that Bob here doesn't know the bit B, Alice doesn't know S1 minus B. Okay? And this is like, this setup is quite common. And the question is now whether you can actually generate this type of setup, whether you need still 4 rounds or whether you can do better than that. And that's actually what we show. What we show is that you can actually generate any type of setup in 3 rounds, and that's actually, you cannot do better than that. Okay? So as a reminder, the standard OT functionality, this is a bit of a hybrid between the standard OT functionality and a random OT functionality, because like you have that ideal functionality samples 2 strings for you, then the receiver says, okay, give me the string SB. The functionality delivers, and now again, because we don't have guaranteed output delivery, the adversary can always say, let's abort this computation. Okay, that's why you need this additional message that says okay or not okay. But if the receiver is fine, the receiver gets S0 and S1, and that's it. Okay, so this is the standard, let's say, OT functionality. What you propose is a different thing, which is like a list OT functionality, where the receiver doesn't get only one possibility. Okay, so the ideal functionality samples multiple pairs. The receiver says, okay, I want the bth element of all these pairs. And then the receiver says, okay, now I think I like the ith pair. You can deliver the ith pair to the sender. Let's call it the sender, although here it's not completely correct to talk about sender, given that the pair is sampled by this idealized process. Okay, so this is like a natural relaxation in some sense of OT, or I mean natural in the sense that follows what you have seen for the case of like least coin tossing. And what you also do is that like we just consider more generic functionality, which is like just some f. Okay, this is just a generalization of what we've seen before. It's a functionality f, receives an input from the receiver, and it samples k different random inputs from the input domain of the sender. In the case of OT, the input domain of the sender were like pairs of random string. Well, think about random bit strings, but they can be random group elements. The functionality now evaluates all the function on the input of the receiver and on every input that has been randomly generated, and delivers all the possible outputs to the receiver, which now again says, I really like the ith output. Let's force this one. Let's deliver this to the honest sender. Okay. Now, before I go into more details about this, the natural question would be like, okay, yeah, this notion seems useful, and it is actually useful, but why does it circumvent the impossibility result we have seen before? And the reason why it circumvents this impossibility result is because in this idealized process, the input of the sender in this case, let's just consider the simple case where just the receiver is corrupt. Not the simple, this is the most complicated case where the receiver is corrupt. Okay? So the ideal functionality here samples input from the in a random way from the input domain of the sender. So the idea is that the simulator can do the following, can just engage in a first interaction with the receiver using a random input, taken uniformly at random from the domain of the, again, from the input domain of the sender. Engages in this interaction with the receiver, which may abort or may not. And if it doesn't abort, now you can see that the simulator can actually do some useful rewind. So now here you are indeed in a case where cut and choose makes sense, because the simulator can just send a new second red message and receive back a new third red message. Okay, so you're again in this cut and choose situation where the simulator can play all the tricks, some of the tricks I showed you before. And indeed, that's what the simulator does and uses to extract the input of the corrupted part. Okay, so once the input of the corrupted part is extracted, you query the ideal functionality. Now, again, the job of the simulator is to force this output to the adversary. Okay, and now you may think that, okay, the simulator can just take maybe the first input, the first output, Z1, and that's it, the simulator is over. But that's not true. That's not true because the receiver now may not like Z1 because he was very happy when he interacted the first time with the simulator and he got some output, maybe because he only likes output at that end with 0, okay? And Z1 doesn't end with 0. So it's completely normal now for the receiver to say, I don't like this one, I abort. And usually this is bad for simulation, okay? And this is exactly the reason why you have this relaxation where from the ideal functionality you get multiple outputs, because this gives the chance to the simulator to try multiple outputs, and at some point you can prove that the adversary will like one of your outputs. Okay, this is tricky to do, but that's kind of the main motivation behind the fact that you have multiple outputs. You need to kind of convince the adversary that at some point he should kind of not abort, assuming that he didn't abort in the first interaction the adversary had with the simulator. Okay? So that's kind of the intuition behind this, the way this ideal functionality is relaxed and designed. So I'm going to show you very briefly how the list of T functionalities is realized, and I'll show you that despite its simplicity, this leads to a sequence of very nice results. And but let's see a bit of constructions now. Okay? So the way we design the list of T functionalities is by using as a main building block an OT protocol, which it's not semi-honest, but it's not even simulation-based secure. So it's an OT that gives you some a form of security against corrupted parties. Okay? In particular, what you get is that you get security against a corrupted sender in the sense that the corrupted sender should not be able to understand whether the input of the receiver is 0 or 1. That's it. In the case of the corrupted sender at a high level, what this security definition tells you is that the corrupted receiver should be able to understand only 1 between S0 and S1. So in particular, like if you have a way to determine that the input of the corrupted receiver is B, okay, by an exponential time extractor, what you want is that these two experiments should be indistinguishable. Okay, the experiment where the sender uses S0 and S1, and the experiment where the sender uses SB, SB. Okay, so this tells you that the corrupted receiver doesn't learn both inputs. And now that we have this tool, how do we design our list oblivious transfer protocol? So, okay, so I'm calling this blue box. This blue box is this private OT that I just defined, and this is the main tool. So how does the protocol work? So at a very high level, you have the following thing happen. The receiver secret shares his input into 2 shares, B0 and B1. And the sender does also some secret sharing of its inputs. Doesn't matter what secret sharing the sender does, it just does some type of secret sharing. In particular, it's a secret sharing in such a way that as long as B0 XOR B1 is equal to, for example, 1, we are guaranteed that the receiver will receive the input as 1, okay? And the other way around. So what is important here is that the input bit of the receiver is secret shared among these two, these two OT executions. And okay, so far nothing crazy is happening here. This is very easy to do. This is like stuff that has been used in many papers in the past. And now what we do on top of this is like that the sender now engages in cut and choose. The sender says, okay, let me see the randomness. Let me see if you were honest in the execution of the Cth execution of this private OT. Okay? So for example, if C is equal to 0, the receiver will disclose the randomness and the input that he has used in the execution of the 0th private OT protocol. Okay. So again, like this cut and choose doesn't harm security in any way because I mean you're just leaking one share, and you can argue that like everything is fine. Actually, you can argue this. A similar approach has been used in this paper of Urger 2005 to argue the security of oblivious transfer combiners. And so all is good here. And now what is the idea? Why does this cut and choose help? For the same reason I showed you before. Because now what the simulator can do is to say, okay, give me your share B0. The simulator can rewind and say, give me the share B1, and you reconstruct the input. Very simple. Very simple. This doesn't work, of course. Like you need to repeat. It's much more complicated than that. But that's kind of the idea. Okay, fantastic. So now what we have obtained is a protocol which allows the extraction of the input from the corrupted receiver. So okay, we are almost done because like we have some form of simulatability against the corrupted receiver. I will not go over the details of how the simulation works, but one of the most important tasks that the simulator should be able to do, it's kind of done. And now we need to make this protocol simulatable also against corrupted sender. We want to be able to extract the input also of the corrupted sender. So what we could do is the following. Well, let's play the same trick. Instead, the receiver now says, give me the input you have used in, when generating the messages of the blue OT with index C prime. And the sender does that. And the idea would be that now the simulator, because again, it can send C prime equal to 0 and C prime is equal to 1, can extract and can see the randomness and the input from both these OT protocols. Okay. The problem is that this fails in a very miserable way, because as we said, the adversary is always rushing. So the adversary is rushing, which means that the adversary, before sending the second round, before completing the execution of this private OT protocol, will wait to receive this blue C prime. So now the adversary waits to receive the blue C prime, and now, he does a very nice execution, a very well-formed execution of the OT protocol with index C prime, but he completely designed in a malicious way the other protocol, like the other private OT execution. Okay, so this is bad. So now, unless we want to increase the random complexity of this problem of this protocol, we need to do something better. We need to hide C prime. I mean, we cannot send it in the third round. We cannot send it in the first round. The point is that we cannot send it in the clear. So what we do is the following. You observe that the protocol we have designed so far, it's like this. It's again, like it gives you some extractability feature from the corrupted receiver, but only gives you indistinguishability security against the corrupted sender. And now what you can do is that you can actually use this protocol to do the cut and choose. So the cut and choose now is done via another OT. I don't send you the C value in the clear, but this C value is part of an OT. That by security of the T, C prime now is hidden. So the adversary cannot play this trick that, I see C prime, now I know what to do correctly. No. So the receiver then, again, will input C prime. The sender will input both randomnesses for both executions of the private key. And the receiver now will be able to check that at least one of these executions was done correctly. And now what the simulator can do is to play the usual trick where there you input C prime equal to 0, C prime equal to 1, and you extract the input from the sender. Okay? This is super messy, but it works. And it gets much more messy when you want to go to more sophisticated functionalities, which I will not show you. But now, why do we like that tool? We like that tool because you can generate setup using that 3-round protocol anytime that you need OT correlation. Actually, you can use that tool to design a more sophisticated protocol, which is 3 rounds still, which you can use to realize any functionality in this restricted security model. And what we show is that this type of primitive actually, when combined together with other things which I'm not going to show you, actually leads to a 4-round protocol, which is optimal, that can be used to realize any functionality, like under the standard security definition that we all love, okay? Making black box use of the underlying primitives. Okay, this is the first result of its kind, and it's again optimal in terms of round complexity, and almost optimal in terms of primitive. Although we would like, it's not clear whether you can do better than ultimately using this notion of private 2T. So the question is whether semi-honest 2T it's really can be useful to achieve all these results. Okay, so this is still an open question. It would be great to solve that. In this area, there are many open questions. Like I didn't mention what is the communication model here. Like do parties use broadcast? Do parties use peer-to-peer? Like, yeah, it's true that parties can abort, but what type of security you get? Like, if someone aborts, can you identify the party? So the answer here is no. In these results, if someone aborts, you just get unanimity in the sense that all honest parties will abort. It's an open question to understand whether you can get identifiable abort here while still making black box use of the underlying cryptographic primitives. And here I was focusing only on round complexity, but of course you can imagine that the size of these messages are very big. I mean, those are all Garble circuit-based approaches. So a natural question would be to then try to minimize also the size of the messages or improve other complexity metrics. Okay, and that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much.